Hi guys, welcome back to Sin and Tonic. Thank you so much for joining me again this week. Last week got heavy and I can't say this week is any better. Sin and Tonic! Today's story is that of John List. I'm going to call him John because List, saying that over and over again is like going to do nothing for my self-esteem. So John, he was born on the 17th of September in 1925. He was the only child of John and Alma. Now, John and Alma were particularly religious. They were devout Lutherans. I don't know if that's how you say it. I'm assuming that's how you say that. And his father was a Sunday school teacher. When List grew up, he also then became a Sunday school teacher, like his father, same name, same job, and followed in his footsteps very much. It is said that his mother was particularly overbearing and that John always wanted to really please his mother and his father. In 1943, List enlisted in the army, the American army, and he became a laboratory technician. This was in World War II. Then he came out of the army. He was discharged in 1946, and this is when he went to university. He was a clever sausage, List. He, however, did lack social skills. So although he was a clever cookie, he didn't have many friends and he was awkward and he just did not get on socially at all. So he went to the University of Michigan and he got a bachelor's degree in business administration and a master's degree in accounting. Clever cookie. Or is he? In November 1950, as the Korean War escalated, List was again enlisted, recalled to active military service. What's going on? I'm spicy today. I am actually a bit spicy today. I'm just having a really good day. I'm just so in love with life and happy. And this is only my first gin, I promise. I see one. Here he is. He's in Virginia. This is where he meets Helen Taylor. She is the widow of an infantry soldier that unfortunately did die in the Korean War. She lived nearby with her daughter Brenda. 1st of December 1951, John and Helen, they tie the knot, they get married and they move to California. First of many moves here. So they've met, they've married, California. The army realised that John obviously was talented with the accounts and things, and they moved him to the finance corps. After he completed his second term in the army in 1952, John got a job in Detroit for an accounting firm. The hands are involved today. They're involved a lot. Oh. So now they're in Detroit. And then he got a job in Kalamazoo. You heard me. Kalamazoo. It is a real place, I promise you. Look it up. Kalamazoo. I'm just going to want to say that over and over and over again to get out of my system. Kalamazoo, 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 Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo. He got a job in Kalamazoo. I don't even remember what the job is now. He was an audit supervisor here in Kalamazoo. This is where his 3 children were born. The years have gone on, and over these years he has built himself up and gained positions in the company. Like I said, he was really smart, so he's gone up the ladder and he's now in a really good position. So by 1959, he'd worked his way up and through the company and into quite a good job. He was the general supervisor of his division. However, the years were not so kind to his wife, Helen, and she became an alcoholic over those years. And it got quite dark, it sounds. So her drinking, mental health, physical health, it all declined over those years. So as John's career was rising and he was doing really well personally, his wife not so much. In 1960, Brenda, which is Helen's daughter from her first marriage, she married somebody and she moved out of the family home. And then List and his family, they moved again to New York, Rochester, New York. Rochester, that sounds nice. I don't know if it is. Is it? Tell me. Here, again, he rose up and he became the director of accounting services. So he was really thriving in his career, old list. But it got better because in 1965, John took the position of vice president in a bank. Whoa, money, money, money. Doesn't it make a change? So far in these stories, this makes a change. He actually used his brain how he was meant to. And he wasn't like shanking people for money. Is that a word? Shanking. He wasn't like getting his money through illegal activity. Makes a change. But it all goes wrong, John. It all goes wrong. He moves again to Jersey City in New York, into the most fabulous looking Victorian mansion called Breeze Knoll. I mean, what? And you can check it out. I'm going to share a picture in here because it's just so beautiful. Like that, this is like my dream house ever. Love it. So it's 19 rooms, massive Victorian mansion, Breeze Knoll. Love it. Here's where the story changes. List loses his job. This guy has got a super duper mansion. He's got an alcoholic wife that needs topping out of alcohol every 2 minutes. And, you know, he's got to pay the bills. He's got to pay this mortgage. And he's just lost his job. Rather than tell his family, get busy looking for another job. I mean, he's so smart. I don't know what came over him here in this moment of time, because he, instead of telling his family and finding himself another job, I mean, he's done it for all these years. He's gone boom, boom, boom and moved all over the place 100 million times. But no, not this time. This time he leaves his home in the morning as usual, and he gets to the train station and he just sits there and he reads the paper, books. He sits there, the day passes, and then off he goes home. None of his family are then aware of this situation. They don't know anything that's going on. He then cannot see another way out of this situation. So what does John do? What are John's options here? Tell the family, get another job, possibly move again, downsize from a 19-bedroom Victorian mansion, perhaps. No. John decides to kill his entire family and do a runner. On the morning of November the 9th, 1971, the family get up and John's children go to school. He has a daughter, Patricia, who's 16, a son also named John Jr., who is 15, and a son, Frederick, who is 13. Off they go to school. Sometime during the morning, John shot his wife, Helen, in the back of the head. He then proceeded to go upstairs to where his mother lived. His mother lived with them. Did I not tell you that? Sophie. So John's mother lived with the family and she lived in the attic. So when they moved to their 19-bedroom mansion in New York, John's mother moved in. And she lived in the attic, but I think it was like an apartment upstairs or something. So she lived up there. So off he goes. He shot Helen in the back of the head, and then he goes upstairs to his mum, and he shot her just above the left eye. So many thoughts when I read these stories. Like sometimes I think really random thoughts, and I'm like, was she awake? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, was she looking at him in the eye when he shot her in the head? You would not be expecting it, would you? So was she just like, oh, hi, John. How was your day? And he walked towards her and she was like, oh, what are you doing? Bong. Or was she having a nap and he shot her in the eye? I don't know, but sometimes I do think these things. I'm just like, you know, how did that pan out? Weird, isn't it? Anyway, I digress. So then he shoots his poor mum above the left eye in the head. So he's now shot his wife, Helen, and his mother. And at this point, okay, He had a lot to say about his wife, the alcoholism. She sounded like it was, it was quite hard work. She was an alcoholic, which is just really sad and tragic and probably very difficult for a family to live with. I'm not saying he should have shot her, but the dog moved and I got scared then. But, okay, to this point, what you doing, John? Okay. And then his mother was said to be really overbearing and everything he did was questioned. And sounds like he had quite a troubled relationship with his mum. Again, not a reason to shoot somebody above your left eye. No, not at all. But up to this point, I was like reading, thinking, okay, maybe he was a man pushed to his edge by these two women, like really overbearing, controlling, like taking over his life. Maybe, Then, after he's done that, he shot them both. Clearly no remorse whatsoever, or no emotional response to it. There's no oh my God, what have I just done? None of that. He pops himself into the kitchen, makes himself a sarnie, eats a sandwich, eats his lunch. I mean, he's only human. He's still going to be hungry. Or is he? Because I couldn't even eat my dinner the other day after talking about Gain and his belt of nipples. Really? Sandwich? Shot your mum, shot her, your wife. That's another level. To me, that's another level. Anyway, so he makes his lunch. Some point then in the afternoon, when they finish school, Patricia, who was 16, and Frederick, who was 13, they come home from school. And really sadly, John shoots both of his children. He shot both of them in the back of the head. And like I said earlier about when you have thoughts about these cases, when I research and look into them, part of me just thought, back of the head, they didn't, hopefully they just didn't see that coming and they didn't even know. List then drives himself to the bank and he closes down his account and his mother's account, takes all the money out. And then he drives to his eldest son's school and watches him play football. I was just like, really, John? So he's watching his son play football for the last time. He knew that as well. This is the last time I'm going to watch my son play football. And then he drove his son home as normal. And then when they returned home, as with the rest of his family, John shot his eldest son, John Jr. This time, however, John Jr.'s body had multiple gunshot wounds. And that was because there was evidence that he'd tried to defend himself, there was a misfire, and then he tried to defend himself or run away. And so John, the dad, just repeatedly shot him to make sure that he was dead. John then places the bodies of his wife and his 3 children on sleeping bags and he puts them in the ballroom. And he tried to get his mother downstairs into the ballroom as well, I believe, but she was too heavy and cumbersome to move her down onto the ground floor. So he didn't, and he left her up in her room. He then penned himself a 5-page letter, which he wrote to his pastor, explaining why he had done what he had done and saying that his mum was up in the loft, attic, apartment. He claimed that there was so much evil in the world and that he was saving his family from that evil by killing them. What about you, John? He wanted to save their souls. Then he busied himself cleaning up all the various crime scenes, and then he went through the house and he took any picture of himself. He cut the pictures of himself out of all of the family photographs. So the family photo albums, anything on the wall picture frames, took himself out of the lot because he was like, I actually honestly wouldn't think of that. Do you know what I mean? That's really meticulous detail, isn't it? Obviously now our faces are all over the internet, everywhere, Facebook, you name it, YouTube, the lot. Like now, it's like if you wanted to, like, everyone's everywhere. Like you couldn't delete a trace of yourself, I don't think. But then obviously there was none of that. So it was just these photographs. And yeah, I thought that was like, I just wouldn't have thought of that. But he did. He removed every photograph and destroyed them. So every photo of himself, gone. John List, who? He then turned the thermostat in the house like down low. Obviously, like the smell of the bodies and stuff like that. I imagine that's what he was thinking. Keep it cool and stuff so that like don't draw attention to the house for as long as possible. His family actually weren't discovered until the 7th of December. So it's over a month after he committed the murders. Excuse me. This was partly due to the family's reclusiveness. Literally, make sure you have friends or just people around you, because another thing that just seems to be so common in these stories is the reclusiveness of everyone. Everyone's like, the parents normally are like really tucking the whole family away and like keeping it very insular and away from other people. And it just seems like, okay, that might be really unhealthy then. He'd also written to the children's schools and their part-time jobs and things like that to say that they would be visiting their grandma, their maternal grandma, and that she was ill. And that was actually true. That was actually a true story. So she was ill, and that is why she wasn't there, because she was due to visit them that week. And he says if she had come, he would have just killed her too. So can you imagine knowing that? Jeez. So yeah, so he'd written these notes, letters. So he kind of had everything covered. He'd really thought it through. He'd close down the bank. He'd closed down his bank and his mum's. He'd written these letters, turned the thermostat down. Like he had it all, taken his photo out of everywhere. He'd really planned it out. Because of this, it was a month or more later that his family were found. And that's just so sad. They were found because he'd left all the lights on. He turned the radio up as well. So he turned the radio up really loud, I guess, so that if anyone like was near, it's a massive house, isn't it? So it's a huge house on like grounds. So it's not like he was like in a terraced house. But I guess if anyone had like come up to have a listen, oh, the radio's on. Oh yeah, there's someone home, the light's on, like that sort of thing. So he'd done that. He'd left the lights on and left the radio turned up. But the lights are what gave it away, because his neighbours that obviously lived 100 miles away, because they're all in these massive houses, they noticed that the lights were on during the day, during the night, during the day, during the night, like they were never off. And that's a bit unusual. And then they started to burn out. The bulbs started to like all go out one by one because they were like burning out. And that's when his neighbours were like, we're going to call the police. And that was when the bodies were discovered. Now, this kind of put Westfield, where they were, on the map, because they had very few violent crimes. And this became like a national story and a massive national manhunt. John, crafty bugger, he had a month's time, didn't he? He'd be gone for a month before they even knew to look for him. So he had like a month's head start on these guys. And I think that is probably why he remained hidden for so long, for 18 years. 18 years. John. And you know, like people say, oh, you can never get time back, which is true. But I kind of feel that way with him, because it's like, you got to live 18 years of your life when you'd killed your whole family, like that you snubbed them out, and then you went on your merry way and you got 18 years free. And we can't get those years back, John. They found John's car at JFK Airport. JFK, yep, said it right. But they didn't find any evidence that he actually boarded a plane. There was none. So they were like, oh, but they found his car at the airport. So skip ahead 18 years. I can't let that go. 18 freaking years. To May 1989. And this 18-year-old crime was on, what do you call it? America's Most Wanted. And it was super interesting because this was like one of the oldest cases that they had ever covered on America's Most Wanted. And they had this man called Frank Bender. And this guy was also a very smart cookie. He created age progression masks, busts, of what people would look like when they were older. And it is unfreaking canny. Sends goosebumps down my spine. So he's a really clever man. So he was like, I think, he worked with a psychologist, like a criminal psychologist. And he was like, I think that he would be the sort of man that would wear glasses to make himself look more, more intelligent and all this, blah, blah, blah. That turned out to be true. And so he made this bust. And then that was on this show, this America's Most, I can't speak it. What? America's Most Wanted. I'm not even going to say that again because it's driving me nuts. 2 weeks later, after this aired, old neighbours of John, who was now calling himself Bob Clark, they watched this show and they were like, that looks like our old neighbour, Bob, doesn't it? And yeah, so they called in, they were like, And because of this tip, the old police, they were like, there. And they nicked him, they arrested him. They were like, okay, we've got you. And they had loads of evidence because they had fingerprints and stuff from when he was enlisted in the army, and then his fingerprints, obviously. And then they had like DNA stuff and stuff from his house because he had lived in that house. So there was more fingerprints at the house, you know, the 19-bedroom mansion, Victorian one. There was that. So like they'd gathered all that evidence from the house and all of it matched up. So he was like, But no, John, or Bob, he stood by his alias for a long old time. No, you've got the wrong person. I'm Bob. No, you're John. No, I'm Bob. But we can prove it. I'm Bob. Like he carried on like that for ages. So annoying. On February the 16th, 1990, John dropped it and was like, yeah, it's me, John. Because they just had too much evidence. He was in a pickle then. Like he was like, yeah, okay, I'm John. Then he told the police what had happened. He had dropped his car at the airport and then he travelled by train from New Jersey to Michigan and then on to Colorado. And then he settled in Denver in 1972. Took an accounting job as Bob Clark. He took an accountant job. Why couldn't he have done that when he lost his other job? I don't get that. I don't get this. There's got to be more to it. He must have wanted to get rid of his mum and wife, and then he was in it for all of it. Maybe he didn't want to leave the kids without a mother. Who knows? But there's more to it than just, oh, I lost my job. There is, isn't there? He joined a Lutheran group, religious group, and he met a woman there called Dolores, and they married in 1985. So he relocated, he got a job, and he married somebody else. He just started again. Again, why couldn't you do that before? John said that the financial situation was dire back in 1972 and that he could not see a way out. The situation with his wife as well was really dire and dark, and that he claimed that his mental health and his mental state at the time was dark. He said, quote, I feel that because of my mental state at the time, I was unaccountable for what happened. I ask all affected by this for their forgiveness, understanding and prayer. And the judge was like, no. So the judge, he gave John the highest sentence that he could. 5 consecutive life sentences. In court, again, they showed the bust. Honestly, something else. Even had on the same glasses that Frank Bender had put on the bust. Just weird. So, and incredible. So he was sentenced to these 5 consecutive life sentences. He did file for appeal, again saying that he was not in his right mind at the time, that he regrets it terribly, but there were professionals that just said he had no remorse whatsoever. And that possibly he had like an OCD personality disorder, which meant that he could only see like 2 ways out of the situation, and that was to accept welfare, which he wasn't going to do, or kill his family. So, okay. He chose that one, didn't he? But that was neither here nor there, because the judge, he was like, no, you're okay. He was interviewed in prison by this woman called Connie Chung in 2002. And she asked the question that I was on my mind. I was like, why didn't he kill himself? Because like, if it's that awful and like so sad that you're like, I can only see two ways out of this, take welfare, which I can't do because of my pride, or kill my family. Why didn't he commit suicide? Why didn't he kill his family and then kill himself? But he said that if he killed himself, it would bar him from heaven. What about killing your whole family? Does that not bar you from heaven? Does it not? I mean, really? So yeah, so he was like, no, I couldn't possibly do that because I've got to go to heaven. So that was his answer for that one. On March 21st in 2008, he passed away. He had complications from pneumonia and he died in prison. The house, Breeze Knoll, that remained vacant for 9 months after the murder until the August. And then it was burnt down. It was ruled as arson, but they never caught anybody. In the ballroom where John placed the bodies of his 3 children and his wife, there was this giant, like, skylight in the ceiling that was said to be like a Tiffany original or something, worth like £100,000 back in the day. And that's the equivalent of like, I don't know, not pounds, dollars, because it was in America. I don't know, like, so it was like $100,000. So probably like $700,000 or $800,000 now. So like a lot of money. Why didn't he just sell that? Can you do that? Can you like take that? Why didn't he just sell his house? Oh, so many questions, so many questions. To me, I'm just like, problem solving it. But that's not what's going to happen, Sophie, because it's happened. Move on. Who knows? Who knows what was going on? Really sad story for his entire family. I always find the like family annihilator thing, just really, really creepy. I'm always like, are you like, if Paul looks at me funny, I'm like, are you okay? It does give me the heebie-jeebies. I don't like it really at all, no. Yeah, just super like sad and tragic that he, regardless of his reasons, that he did that to his whole family. Today's gin, guess what? I'm waiting for a delivery of gin and I was hoping with all of my heart that it would come today. Hasn't. So I've gone for my favourite, which I have spoken to you about before, but it's the orange, it's the Sipsmith one, the orange and cacao gin. And again, because I haven't had my delivery, I don't have a new tonic to share with you either. What's going on? So, you know, nothing new here. But next week there will be, and I will share it with you and let you know. Also, I have not drunk a lot of this today, have I? Been too interested in the story. The dog hasn't graced us with his presence today, so there's been not really much snoring, I can't imagine, going on, because he's away. Anyway, peacefulness. As always, thank you so much for joining me again this week. I hope you can join me next week for another true crime story and a glass of gin. Bye!